President Trump Wednesday canceled a news conference and left the NATO summit early after a hot mic caught other world leaders appearing to laugh at his expense. Ben Tracy is in London with the details.
They posed for a family photo, but 70 years into the NATO alliance, this family seems a bit dysfunctional.
So this will be actually my last meeting.
President Trump canceled a formal press conference today after dropping this rhetorical bomb on Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Well, he's two-faced.
Mr. Trump was angry about this video of Trudeau apparently mocking him while talking with French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson at Buckingham Palace Tuesday night.
I have a very good relationship with President Trump and his team.
Trudeau said he was talking about President Trump's sudden announcement that next year's G7 summit will be held at Camp David.
Every different leader has teams who every now and then have their jaws drop at unscheduled surprises, like that video itself, for example.
Today, it was President Trump caught on a hot mic talking about Trudeau.
That was funny when I said the guy's two-faced.
Mr. Trump had wanted the focus to be on him bolstering NATO by successfully strong-arming allies into paying more for their own defense.
If you look at NATO today compared to NATO 3 years ago when I started, we built up NATO.
But that was overshadowed by unguarded comments about a president who promised to restore the dignity of the U.S. abroad.
And the world is laughing at us. They're laughing at the stupidity of our president.
President Trump says Justin Trudeau is just upset because he criticized him for not contributing enough to NATO. Before he left town, Mr. Trump did say he thinks Trudeau is actually a really nice guy. Tanya.
Ben Tracy in London, thank you. And joining me now is CBS News State Department reporter Christina Ruffini. Christina, welcome. So we heard a lot there about personal tensions between world leaders at NATO. So aside from all of that, did any real diplomacy get done?
They did actually come out with a communique, which is nice because at some of these global summits, we've seen enough divisions between the allies and the U.S. that they haven't called it a communique or they've issued it in different ways because they were afraid, frankly, the U.S. wouldn't sign on to it. But they did manage to issue an agreement on things they all agree on, which include things like support for Afghanistan, having everybody pay their 2%, which is a really big issue with President Trump. He brought it up multiple times. And they did talk about the Article 5 mutual defense clause, which is basically if any one of us are attacked, if any member of the alliance is attacked, it's like an attack on our homeland and we'll all rush to defend you. And that's something that President Trump has been a little squishy on. Even this week, he was saying, well, you know, if one of these tiny countries gets attacked, you know, why should we all go in? And he's talked about it before as something he's not necessarily really gung-ho about, but it is in the communique in the document that they got out of the end of this
and
as a work
sign
product.
It.
And it's the U.S. is on. The U.S. is on board.
All right. So, you know, we do know that President Trump once threatened to leave NATO, but recently he defended it because he'd heard it described as brain dead. And, you know, specifically the U.S.'s role in NATO was criticized. So what's to account for this apparent flip-flop?
So President Macron, who had been trying very hard to get President Trump on his side, kind of just threw in the towel, it seems, and did this interview where he said NATO was brain dead and it didn't work. And the things he cited were things like, you know, Turkey is a NATO ally and Turkey's incursion into Syria against the wishes of the U.S. and the rest of the alliance really just shows that it's not working. But it's a little bit of reverse psychology. There was a column where they said, you know, Macron managed to best Trump with toddler psychology. You know, you don't want that toy. Oh, I like that toy. It's my favorite toy. Oh, wait, no, I want that toy. So by insulting it, all of a sudden, he put President Trump in the position of having to defend it.
Right.
And, you know, he said those comments were very, very nasty. And it seems to have brought him around a little bit on the alliance because he didn't like somebody else insulting it.
There you go. Now, speaking of Turkey, we know that there was an unannounced meeting between Turkish President Erdogan and President Trump on Wednesday. We know, of course, that both President Trump and Erdogan have faced a lot of criticism over Turkey's incursion into Syria. Did that come up? First of all, do we know what they discussed at this unannounced meeting? And did that situation in Syria come up during NATO?
I mean, you can assume it came up. We never get a very, very detailed read out of these meetings. It's always like we talked about things that are important to the alliance. We talked about regional issues, and that's a big umbrella for all of these issues. It's not just the Syria issue. There's also this issue, especially relevant to NATO, where Turkey has acquired this Russian missile system that the U.S. said you can't have it. If you take it, we're going to take you out of the F-35 jet program. And Turkey said, too bad, we're getting it anyway. So the Trump administration is supposed to have sanctioned them under these CAATSA sanctions, but they haven't done that, and they've put it off for months and months and months, and no one will really answer questions about when they're going to do it. They have said, at first it was like, well, if they take delivery, we're going to sanction them. And then it was like, well, if they turn it on, we're going to sanction them. But now Turkey is moving towards testing it, and we still haven't seen these sanctions go into place. So there are more issues at play than just the Syria incursion, which is disrupting the entire region and the U.S. strategy in the area.
And was there any readout then of the meeting between President Trump and President Erdogan?
They talked. They're working on the issues. They're good friends. They, it's a lot of bluster. But as far as specifics, it's very hard to get any specifics about what was said and when. But we can be sure that they're talking at it, and they're talking about it at a ministerial level in Lisbon today with the ministers, including Secretary Pompeo.
Okay, speaking of Secretary Pompeo, we do hear that the Trump administration is considering sending more troops to the Middle East to counter the threat from Iran. Secretary Pompeo is supposedly set to go to Israel to meet with Netanyahu, the prime minister.
And Netanyahu met with him in Lisbon
okay.
on the sidelines of this ministerial
And so
meeting.
do we know where those plans stand?
We don't. This is an interesting time to watch the U.S. policy in Iran because the Trump administration has been really hard on Iran. They pulled out of the JCPOA, which is the Iran nuclear agreement. They've put in punishing sanctions, round after round of sanctions. And we're seeing at the moment, the Iranians tried to raise the gas prices, and then we're seeing all these riots and protests. So this is, depending on who you ask, it's either a great opportunity for the Trump administration to kind of turn the final screws and try to get the population to push the Iranian government into changing its behavior, or it could possibly backfire. And if the Iranian regime is so busy trying to put down a popular protest, there's no way to get them back to the table and get them to renegotiate the nuclear deal. But the Trump administration has made no secret of the fact they are all in with this maximum pressure campaign. And I'm sure that's what they discussed with Israel. They said they talked about Iran, and I'm sure that they're talking about other ways to keep the pressure on.
And protests are continuing in Iran.
As far as we know.
All right, Christina Ruffini, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.